The idea that you can never please everyone is one of the hardest truths to swallow, but once you accept it, life becomes much lighter. Human beings are created with different minds, personalities, desires and expectations. What makes one person happy may irritate another, and what satisfies someone today may not satisfy them tomorrow. People change. Their opinions shift like the wind, and their judgments are often based on limited knowledge, personal moods, or even jealousy. That means if you spend your entire life running after people's approval, you are chasing something that cannot be caught. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. It will always slip through your fingers, no matter how tightly you close your fist. Think about the way people are wired. Everyone has their own set of standards. For some, you'll never be religious enough. For others, you'll be too religious. If you speak too much, they'll say you talk too loud. If you stay quiet, they'll call you antisocial. If you succeed, some will clap while others secretly resent you. Even if you give your best to someone, there will always be someone else watching, ready to say, "It wasn't enough." That is the reality of dealing with human beings. They are inconsistent, and so is their approval. Now imagine building your entire sense of worth on something as unstable as people's opinions. You'll live your whole life like a prisoner, careful not to offend this person, desperate to impress that one, constantly adjusting who you are just to fit into someone else's expectation. That is a heavy burden. It drains your energy, it steals your peace, and it leaves you feeling empty. No matter how much effort you put in, there will always be a voice somewhere saying you should have done more, or you should have done it differently. If you let those voices control you, you will never feel free. One of the greatest examples of this reality can be found in the life of the Prophet Muhammad. He was the most truthful, the most merciful, and the most noble of all men. Yet still there were people who hated him. Some called him a liar, others called him a magician, others accused him of being insane. If the best of creation, the man chosen by Allah himself, could not please everyone, then what chance do you or I have? Trying to achieve what even the Prophet Muhammad didn't achieve is both impossible and misguided. There's also something dangerous about constantly seeking people's approval. It makes you weak. When you are always worried about what others think, you start to compromise your principles. You become too scared to stand up for truth, because it might make someone dislike you. You hide your beliefs, your values and your identity, all for the sake of keeping people comfortable. But the reality is, no matter how much you shrink yourself, there will still be someone who disapproves. In the end, you lose both yourself and your peace. That's why Islam teaches us not to run after people's approval. The Quran and Sunnah remind us that the only approval that matters is Allah's. Once you internalize that, you'll find a new kind of strength. You'll realize that it's okay if people don't always clap for you. It's okay if they misunderstand you. It's okay if they dislike you for following your deen. Their opinions don't hold your risk. They don't control your future, and they definitely don't decide your place in Jannah. Accepting that you can never please everyone is actually a form of freedom. It takes the weight off your shoulders. You stop exhausting yourself trying to manage the unmanageable, and you start focusing on what really matters, living with sincerity, doing what's right, and seeking Allah's pleasure above all else. That is where peace lies. Not in the shaky ground of people's approval, but in the unshakable ground of Allah's guidance. Islam teaches us that the central purpose of our lives is to seek the pleasure of Allah. This is the foundation upon which everything else rests. When you truly understand this, it changes the way you live, the way you think, and the way you deal with others. Unlike people whose opinions change with time, Allah's standard of what is right and wrong never shifts. He is Al-Haq, the absolute truth. That means you can live with certainty and direction, knowing exactly what you are striving for, without the need to bend or break yourself to fit into constantly changing human expectations. When you try to please people, you find yourself in a maze with no exit. One day they demand one thing, the next day the opposite. Pleasing Allah, however, is a straight path. The Quran and Sunnah give us clear guidance, and that guidance does not waver. Allah's commands are not based on mood, culture or social pressure. They are rooted in wisdom, justice and mercy. This gives you a sense of stability that no human approval can ever provide. You no longer live life like a reed blowing in the wind. You stand firm, knowing your compass points to Allah, not to the opinions of the crowd. Another reason Islam only calls us to please Allah is that His pleasure is tied to your ultimate success. People can reward you with claps, smiles or compliments, but those things fade in seconds. Allah, however, rewards with forgiveness, barakah, peace in your heart, and if you remain steadfast, eternal Jannah. What use is the applause of the world if it costs you the mercy of the Creator? And what loss is it if the people disapprove, while Allah raises your status in this life and the next? The Quran reminds us that the people of truth have always been mocked and opposed, yet they were the ones honored by Allah. Pleasing Allah also frees you from being a slave to others. When your main concern is whether He is pleased with you, then insults, criticism or disapproval from others lose their power over you. Their praise doesn't inflate you, and their dislike doesn't break you. You walk through life with dignity, rooted in your faith. This is why so many of the righteous predecessors were fearless in the face of kings, armies or social rejection. They had already chosen whom they wanted to please, and it wasn't the people, it was Allah. At the same time, aiming to please Allah often has a positive effect on people anyway. When you live by honesty, kindness, patience and justice, all qualities Allah commands, you naturally end up treating others in a way that earns respect. But the difference is that your motivation is not their approval. You do good because Allah loves it, not because you want people to clap. And if they don't recognize it, it doesn't matter because Allah does. Every hidden act of sincerity, every moment of sacrifice, every struggle to stay upright is seen by Him. It is also important to remember that pleasing Allah requires consistency, not perfection. People sometimes expect impossible standards. They can be quick to judge or harsh when you make mistakes. Allah, on the other hand, knows you better than you know yourself. He sees your efforts, your intentions and your struggles. When you fall, He invites you back through tawbah. His mercy outweighs His wrath, and His door is always open. That alone makes His pleasure far more valuable and attainable than the shifting and fragile approval of human beings. Living to please Allah is ultimately a life of clarity. You don't have to chase 100 different opinions. You don't have to lose yourself in a crowd of expectations. You just need to return again and again to the same question: is Allah pleased with me in this choice, in this action, in this moment? If the answer is yes, then you have succeeded, no matter what anyone else thinks. And if the answer is no, then the approval of the entire world cannot save you. That is why Islam directs us to anchor our lives in Allah's pleasure alone. It is the only approval that truly matters, in this world and in the hereafter. When a person chases after people's approval, they enter a cycle that never ends and never satisfies. It is like drinking salty water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. At first, the praise of others feels rewarding, but it fades quickly. Then you need more recognition, more validation, more applause. This endless pursuit leaves the heart restless, because people's opinions are not consistent. What they like today, they may dislike tomorrow. What earns you respect from one group might make another group look down on you. In the process of trying to keep everyone happy, you end up losing yourself and exhausting your soul. This constant search for approval can also destroy your sincerity. When your actions are fueled by the desire to be seen and praised, you are no longer doing them for the sake of Allah. You may still achieve people's admiration, but your heart becomes empty, because deep inside you know it wasn't for the right reason. The Prophet ﷺ warned us against showing off, calling it a form of hidden shirk, because it replaces the intention of pleasing Allah with the intention of impressing people. The emptiness that follows is proof that this path is hollow. Another layer of this emptiness comes from the fact that people are forgetful and ungrateful by nature. You can spend years serving someone, helping them, sacrificing for them, and the moment you make one mistake, they may forget all the good you did. If your self-worth is tied to their approval, that rejection will crush you. But if your worth is tied to Allah's acceptance, you can withstand it because you know Allah never forgets any good deed, even if it is as small as an atom. Living for people's validation also makes you unstable. One word of praise lifts you, one word of criticism destroys you. Your emotions rise and fall depending on others. That instability eats away at your peace and confidence, leaving you constantly second-guessing yourself. Instead of living with purpose, you live in fear of disapproval. That is not strength, it is slavery. The truth is, when you chase people you will always end up drained. Their approval is too fragile, too inconsistent, and too limited to ever fill your heart. Real fulfillment only comes when you chase Allah's pleasure, because His approval is constant, eternal, and tied to your ultimate success. When a person chooses to seek Allah's pleasure above all else, something remarkable happens. They find protection, honor and peace in ways that no human being could ever provide. Unlike the fragile approval of people, Allah's approval comes with real security. He is Al-Hafiz, the protector, and when He is pleased with you, He defends you in ways you cannot even see. The Quran and Sunnah remind us that those who live for Allah are never abandoned. Even when people turn against them, even when the world criticizes or misunderstands them, Allah stands with them, and when Allah is with you, what loss can you really face? The Prophet Muhammad last told us that whoever seeks the pleasure of Allah, even if it displeases people, Allah will suffice him against the people. This is a promise that should reshape the way we live. Think about what it means. If your intention is pure, if your effort is sincere, and if your choices align with what Allah's, then no amount of human opposition can truly harm you. People may try to discredit you, speak against you, or even harm you, but their power is limited. Allah's power has no limits. He can turn their plans against them, He can raise your rank through their insults, and He can open doors for you where they thought they had locked you out. There is also a deep sense of inner honor that comes when you live to please Allah. Instead of constantly seeking validation, you walk with dignity, because you know the one who matters is already pleased with you. This dignity is not arrogance, it is confidence rooted in faith. The companions of the Prophet embodied this. They faced ridicule, persecution, and even torture, yet they stood firm because their mission was not to gain human approval but to uphold the truth for Allah's sake. History remembers them with honor, while those who oppose them are remembered with shame. Allah gave them a status that no worldly recognition could ever match. Living for Allah's pleasure also brings a kind of stability that nothing else can. When you root yourself in His commands and His love, you are no longer swayed by the ever-changing expectations of society. You are no longer running after trends, moods, or opinions. You stand grounded on unshakable truth. This stability is a protection in itself. While others may feel lost and insecure, your compass is fixed on Allah, and that gives you direction even in the darkest time. The honor of pleasing Allah is not limited to this world. In the hereafter, those who live sincerely for Him will be granted a status far greater than any earthly recognition. They will be honored in front of all creation, and their sacrifices, big and small, will be rewarded with Jannah. On that day, the claps, the applause, and the approval of people will mean nothing. The only thing that will matter is whether Allah is pleased. And for those who chose Him above the people, He promises eternal honor, eternal peace, and eternal reward. So when you feel the pull to compromise your values just to fit in, remind yourself that people cannot offer you lasting protection. Their approval cannot shield you from hardship, nor can it grant you Jannah. Only Allah can do that. And when He is pleased with you, His protection surrounds you, His barakah fills your life, and His honor raises you in ways you could never imagine. That is why choosing Allah's pleasure over people's is not just the right choice, it is the only choice that leads to real strength, true protection, and everlasting honor. One of the biggest traps a believer can fall into is compromising their deen for the sake of validation. The desire to be liked, accepted, or praised is natural, but when it comes at the cost of your faith, it becomes dangerous. Islam is clear about this. Truth is not meant to be watered down. Principles are not meant to be bent just to make people comfortable. The Quran calls us to stand firmly for justice, even if it goes against ourselves, our families, or society's expectations. That strength cannot coexist with a constant need for human approval. When you start softening or hiding your deen to avoid criticism, you begin a cycle of slow erosion. First, you skip a small act of worship because someone might find it too much. Then you avoid speaking the truth because it could make someone uncomfortable. Then you start blending in so well with what's wrong that there's no visible line between you and those who oppose your value. What seemed like a minor compromise becomes a habit, and before long, your principles are no longer guiding your life. People's reactions are. This is exactly the weakness Islam warns us against. Holding onto your deen requires courage. It means you will sometimes be labeled, misunderstood, or mocked, but it also means you are walking in the footsteps of the prophets. Every prophet faced resistance from their people. They could have stayed silent. They could have altered their message to win approval, but they did. They knew that their mission was not to fit into society's molds, but to uphold Allah's command. If they had watered down their message, they might have gained temporary comfort, but they would have lost their integrity and their purpose. In our time, the pressure is just as strong, though it takes different forms. It might come from social media, where everyone wants to be seen as relatable and acceptable to the majority. It might come from work environments, schools, or even within families, where practicing openly can make you feel like an outsider. The temptation is always there. Maybe if I hide this part of my deen, people will like me more. But the truth is, those people's approval will never last. And if you compromise what Allah commanded, their acceptance will come at the cost of your peace with Him. There is also a hidden power in refusing to compromise. When you hold firmly to your deen, even in uncomfortable situations, you gain respect, even from those who disagree with you. People may not admit it, but they admire consistency. They may mock you outwardly, but inwardly they know you are not easily swayed. And if they dislike you, it doesn't harm you, because your strength does not come from them. It comes from Allah, who honors those who honor His deen. Another reality is that compromising never truly satisfies people. The moment you give up one principle to win them over, they will demand another. It becomes a chain that never ends, pulling you further and further away from your foundation. By contrast, when you set boundaries based on your deen, people learn where you stand, and over time, they adjust to it. More importantly, you maintain your self-respect and your closeness to Allah. In the end, validation from people is temporary, fragile and limited. Validation from Allah is eternal, unshakable, and tied to your ultimate success. When you compromise for people, you lose both their lasting respect and Allah's approval. But when you hold firmly to your deen, even if it costs you people's comfort, Allah places strength in your heart, barakah in your life, and dignity in your legacy. That is why the path of real strength is not in watering down your faith, but in living it fully and unapologetically for the sake of Allah alone. One of the most liberating truths in Islam is realizing that only Allah controls Jannah. People may have opinions about you, they may love you, criticize you, misunderstand you, or even reject you, but none of that determines your final destination. Paradise does not belong to them. They cannot hand it to you as a gift, nor can they block you from it if Allah has written it for you. When you anchor your heart in this reality, you stop fearing the judgments of people and start focusing on the judgment of the one who truly matters. So many people live weighed down by what others think. They fear losing status in front of their community, or disappointing family, or being criticized by strangers. Yet on the day of judgment, none of these people will stand beside them to defend them. Everyone will be worried about themselves, saying, myself. On that day, your relationship with Allah will be the only thing that counts. His mercy, His forgiveness, and His approval will decide your eternity, not the applause or disapproval of the crowd. When you realize that only Allah owns Jannah, you also understand how small people's opinions really are. Someone might insult you for wearing hijab, for growing a beard, for praying openly, or for living by Islamic principles. In their eyes, you might seem too strict or outdated. But does their judgment change anything in the sight of Allah? Not at all. If Allah is pleased with your obedience, then their mockery is meaningless. If Allah loves your effort, then their criticism cannot take away even an ounce of your reward. This perspective gives you strength. It frees you from being chained to other people's approval and allows you to walk firmly on the straight path. The opposite is also true. Someone may praise you endlessly, celebrate you and make you feel like you are special. But if Allah is not pleased with your actions, their words mean nothing. Human approval cannot open the gates of paradise. Their compliments cannot erase sins. Their applause cannot grant forgiveness. Only Allah can do that. That is why it is dangerous to become addicted to praise. It distracts you from the only approval that matters, and gives you a false sense of security. There is also a deeper comfort in knowing that Allah's judgment is perfectly just. People often misjudge because they cannot see your intentions, your struggles, or the sacrifices you make in private. They may assume the worst of you or dismiss your efforts. Allah, on the other hand, knows every detail. He sees the silent battles, the unspoken du'as, the late-night tears, and the moments of sincerity no one else witnessed. His reward takes into account every atom of good you did, and He never overlooks it. That kind of recognition is far more valuable than anything people can give. The awareness that only Allah controls Jannah also shifts your priorities. It makes you ask, in every situation, what does Allah want from me here, instead of what will people say if I do this? That question becomes your compass, guiding you toward choices that matter in the long run. Sometimes it means standing alone, sometimes it means facing criticism. But the promise of Allah is that whoever chooses Him over the people will never be abandoned. Their path may be difficult, but it ends in eternal peace. In the end, Life is short and people's approval fades quickly. The same people who cheer for you today might turn against you tomorrow. The same society that pressures you now will forget you when you're gone. But Allah's judgment will remain, and His paradise is forever. So live with this truth carved into your heart. People do not own Jannah. They cannot give it and they cannot take it. Only Allah decides who enters, and He promised it to those who seek His pleasure sincerely. If you hold on to that, you will walk this world with clarity, strength, and freedom, always aiming for the approval of the one whose approval truly matters. At the end of the day, Islam frees us from the exhausting cycle of trying to please everyone. It teaches us that people's approval is fragile, inconsistent, and ultimately powerless. You can chase it your whole life and still come up empty, because their opinions cannot give you peace, protection, or Jannah. What truly matters is Allah's pleasure, the one constant, the one standard that never changes. When you choose to live for Him, you gain dignity, stability, and strength. You stop compromising your Deen for temporary validation, and you stop fearing the judgment of those who cannot control your destiny. The truth is simple. People did not create you, they do not sustain you, and they cannot determine your eternity. Allah does, and only His approval carries eternal weight. So live boldly, live sincerely, and live with the courage to put His pleasure above all else. Because on the day of judgment, the opinions of the world will vanish into nothing, but the pleasure of Allah will remain forever. Islam doesn't want you to please everyone. Islam wants you to please the one who holds your past, your present, and your future in His hands. And when you choose Him, you will never lose.